two championship contenders giving it everything.
No, Mikey. No, Mikey.
It's lights out.
No, Mikey.
And away we go. Well, happy Sunday night, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Pit Stop Pals, Season 2, Episode 8, Spanish Grand Prix recap. And Gager, before we get going here, I think I could hear, like, your TV. Like, you don't have to change it because I can't hear it now. But were you still watching F1 channels? Like, I feel like I heard a guy with an accent. Are you still breaking this stuff down?
It's on, Dusty. I won't lie to you. But like I said, I love watching the F1 guys first, Coulthard and Julian Palmer. I love the just the former driver aspect, and with F1 TV they give you a little bit of tidbits and stuff and extra camera angles at points. But I throw it back on Crofty the second time around while I'm cleaning up and just the starts with Crofty. It's like I don't know how he has that much breath in him off the start, and it just gets to a crescendo until he hands it off eventually after that first corner.
It's amazing. Like his call to start a race is phenomenal. And the only comparison, like I do hockey and football, the only comparison I would have for me from like that much energy that quickly would be a kick return. Like when there's a kick return, it's that same sort of thing. It's just like boom, 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 boom. And then you get to the top and it kind of comes back down as they sail home. But I can't imagine there's so much shit going on at the start of a race. And Crofty pretty much nails all of it, man. It's quite the scene.
He nailed it perfectly, like the whole start of the race. It was so disheartening to see what happened with Lando Norris after what he was able to accomplish through qualifying. And I don't know if the McLaren, well, this is the thing that made me even more upset throughout the whole race, Dusty, is you saw what Oscar Piastri was able to do. He had a pretty good race. And
yeah, he did.
I was thinking, maybe there's not enough race pace in that McLaren car as of yet. But what Piastri was able to do, man, you got to think that's a huge missed opportunity from Lando. And I don't know. I was a little bit disappointed with Lando's overall performance just because he went all the way to the back. Yeah, it was unfortunate, but you saw what happened at the back of the race tonight or this morning, Dusty. It was there was constant passing and battling. It was intense back there, and Lando just seemed to be kind of poopy pants in the back, and
he was so
okay
disappointed with what happened, right? Like, yeah.
And I just thought of, was this the race where he was leading and lost a few years ago? Was it Spain where the rain came?
Is that was it Spain? I feel like they mentioned that on the broadcast a couple of weeks ago.
Did they?
Well,
okay.
Yeah.
I just thought of that. I didn't know, but if this isn't his race, this is where it happened before too, with what happened.
It says here 2021 Russian Grand Prix.
Oh, was it the Russian
I just
Grand Prix?
Googled
Okay.
Lando rain loss, and it says Norris slides off track in pouring rain. So Russian Grand Prix. Lando Norris
Sochi.
Devastated to lose weight. Sochi. Yeah. So that's where it was. So but you know, like Piastri I think finished 13th. Lando was a little bit further down after really good qualifying. I was stunned to see what McLaren did in qualifying, buddy.
Yeah, like seeing Zach Brown going nuts in the garage after, I was like, holy smoke, because they brought a lot of upgrades too, right? They brought some which didn't make sense in Monaco last week, but you could see some definite one lap pace. Like what was the fine, like qualifying, everyone was within us, like, what was it, 8 tenths?
I think 16 guys were within a second or something. Like
it's unbelievable how close the cars are on that one lap pace in qualifying. Qualifying's unbelievable this year, and just the amount of passing on a track today that by all accounts you haven't seen a lot of opportunities to overtake, Dusty. There was tons today, and it was awesome.
Yeah, it really was. There was tons of passing today. I thought it was absolutely terrific to watch. Just sticking with Lando in that start here as we're kind of just focused on the first lap. he just made a mistake, right? Like there really wasn't anything else to do. He just kind of, I guess, some pressure in front of Lewis from the mini battle. It wasn't a huge battle, but for like a couple of corners, it looked like Sainz was going to push Verstappen a little bit, which I guess might have caught Lando off guard, and that's what ended up happening, Gager, because that was a real buzzkill for him.
Well, I think there was, from what I've watched and what I've heard, it seems to me that Lando was hesitant a little bit and then tried to put his nose in an ill opportune time, and that's where the contact came and ruined his race. Like if he was going to commit, he should have done it on the outside a little bit earlier with Lewis and tried to establish that position a little bit more. Probably would have got pushed off, but I mean it was an ill judgment for him to try that later. Like I think he was, I messed up there, and he was trying to make up for that quick little mistake, and it just it catered on him. But it would have been so great to see a McLaren up at the top, at least for the start of the race.
Yeah,
would have been great.
Would have been fun. Sainz never really had a legit shot at Verstappen, did he? I mean, they talked about in qualifying, you have a better chance advancing in that third spot as opposed to being in second. And it looked like he wanted to kind of go around the outside, but Max wasn't going to have that, was he?
Well, again, I'm just puzzled by the whole how Red Bull's the only team that has a different tire choice at the start of the race.
I know they were both on the different tires. Yeah.
So I just don't. And plus, this is what was most surprising. And maybe it was Red Bull knowing that their car is way more efficient, and if they lost the first corner off the start, they knew there was a good opportunity for Max to get it back. So why not go on the mediums and go a little bit longer? But again, like Max just isn't giving up
no chance.
Spot. Yeah. Not a chance.
He would have driven him right off the track. Like.
Oh, yeah, he would have just kept going. And it was I thought there was an actual opportunity because the Ferrari showed great pace in qualifying. Carlos was having a great weekend, and then Max just shuts the door and goes on a Sunday drive again.
Well, let's get into Red Bull then. They've won every race, whether it's Max has won most of them. Checo's got a couple. I mean, do they lose at some point, Gager? It seems like even if Max can't do it, they'll focus on Checo and he'll get it done. So, I mean, it sounds crazy to say we're just sitting here on episode 8 of season 2, but I think Lewis was the only guy within 30 seconds. Max lapped like another 6 cars again. I don't know. Do they lose? Even if they don't qualify at the top, which they usually do, I still feel like they'll just win the race.
Yeah, I mean, to see how Checo sliced through the field afterwards, having a subpar day too. And then Toto Wolff actually admitting, I hate to say this, but Max is on a different level than everyone else. So the car is performing at such a high level, but then you have a driver that can, and he got black and white flagged today, Dusty. Like he was so far, he didn't need to do that. He could have just kept it, but he was still trying to just push it. And I've watched, I don't know if you've watched the Senna documentary where he was same type of thing. He's in Monaco. He's like a minute ahead of everyone, and he's still trying to just obliterate the field. And that's what I feel like Max is doing. He just wants to lap everybody off the second lap of the race. It seems like
pretty much.
He just wants to go around everyone again, and it's he's phenomenal. If you watch his lap times, he's on the medium tire, whereas most of those tires or those cars should be being able to close the gap a little bit, and they can't. Max is just he's just way too good.
He's been absolutely phenomenal. Now, it's funny because, like in qualifying, you mentioned it's so close in qualifying, but that race pace is just, I mean, nobody can touch it for an extended period of time, right? Like that's the big difference here. Well,
it was Mercedes in qualifying that were trying that test tire and went a little bit longer than what I think they were supposed to do. And I think it was I don't know. They don't know what it is, but I think it was more of a hard tire. That made sense afterwards, the race, just seeing, because I think Mercedes was trying to see how their race pace kind of compared to everyone else, and they took a little bit more information from that, because Mercedes, I don't really know how George Russell didn't get driver of the day, Dusty.
He didn't get driver of the day?
I don't think he did. I think he was unbelievable for what he did today. The pass on Alcon, and
he was cruising today.
I think the name of this episode, the upgrades work. The upgrades work. It's the Mercedes is a different car, and you could see it, I think, with Lewis and with his interviews after the race. He was like, okay, this is a little bit better. We're still a ways from Red Bull, but this has really encouraged him, at least, to be a lot more successful. He said maybe we can catch them by the end of the season, but definitely next year we're looking at something, which is cool, because I didn't know if Lewis...
I liked when he said next year. Yeah, it almost seemed like a sigh of relief when he was sitting there. They're sitting with their 2-3 finish. It was Lewis that ended up getting voted driver of the day. Probably should have been George, moving up from 12 to 3. But still, I mean, Lewis had a good drive as well. But yeah, you could tell it was just a different vibe around Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, knowing because he was standing in front of the Red Bull car, that he kind of looked, he pointed behind. It was just like, this thing's probably still too quick for us right now. But I like the fact that he said next year. And I mean, now that they've got, who was it? Somebody tweeted out that like everybody's just got engineers looking at that floor of Red Bull, trying to figure out exactly what's going on. That's the big mystery, right? So we'll see what ends up happening there moving forward. But if you're Mercedes right now, I mean, Lewis, he just did what he wanted. It was as far as he could get up. And from the start of the race on, George Russell was absolutely flying, like bar down, far and away. The best that Mercedes has looked. They take it over second in the constructor standings, and at this stage, man, I don't think they look back. I mean, they're not going to catch Red Bull, but I feel like they're on the verge of separating themselves from Aston Martin and Ferrari as well.
This looks like 2 years ago, Dusty, where it was Max, Lewis, and Valtteri.
That's right. Yeah,
it's kind of just switch Russell in there instead. Because the other team, I would be really worried right now for Ferrari, first of all, and for Aston Martin, in a sense, where they had another consistent race, but now second place does not seem locked up. You saw what the upgrades did to Mercedes, how they cut through the other Aston Martins. And now they've taken over second in the Constructors' Championship. That definitely brought a smile to Toto Wolff's face.
Well, yeah, he was happy. But it's like I'm trying to think of other races where, it hasn't been the case. I mean, this was the first race all season where you saw Mercedes 3 or 4 seconds back of somebody, and you're like, oh yeah, they'll catch them in about 11 laps and pass them. Yeah. Like it was like that was a thing today for the first time, which I think has to be a major concern for all those other teams. Because for the first 6 races of the year, let's say pre-Monaco, it was Aston Martin who was doing that. To Mercedes, right? So these Mercedes upgrades have obviously worked. Not to the point that they're going to catch Red Bull, but to the point that if somebody outside of Red Bull was not going to win a race this year, might end up being Lewis Hamilton or George Russell.
Well, I wrote on the big board here, lap 33 is Mercedes back, right? Because they were just slicing and dicing.
That's when George was coming all the way up, right? He was up into like 4th right away.
Yeah. And I also wrote Bottas is faster on his 10-speed bike than his car. But,
that poor guy. God, I feel bad for that guy.
Yeah.
Jeez. And he hasn't been fully Ricardo'd yet, but it still sucks to be stuck in the car that he's in right now.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what about Ferrari here, Gager? You text me, you're like, oh my God, Ferrari this week. And I was like, what's going on? And you said the side pods, and then you look at it. And
I thought that, they made some adjustments. It looked like, again, I don't know if it's so much the car, Dusty, but the choices, they talk about it on the broadcast where you hear the radio contact between other drivers and the pit wall, and there's a sense of unity, or they have an idea in mind, and still Ferrari is asking guys what to do, and you hear Carlos, no, where the pace is good, and well, if it's good, pick it up a little bit. They just seem just the pit stops were terrible. Like Coulthard was going on about, look, you're a top 3 team, 4 team in F1. And the fact that there's other teams outperforming you on a consistent basis on pit stops is absolutely ridiculous. Like every time, 1 second, that like you watch Mercedes.
You can't have that. Like,
no, you watch Red Bull. That's all these guys do is practice their pit stops. There's a reason why they get fastest pit stop every year. It's because they practice. And you see just guys, oh well, the jack's not really there. The sense of urgency is ridiculous. With every little, the things that are completely under control with your team are not being taken care of with Ferrari, and that's what we've seen, I think, over the last few years.
What else is on that board, Gager? I think we hit on the big things, but what else stood out for you?
Well, like looking at rookies is just seeing how they were doing. Oscar Piastri, man, that he's I think McLaren has something with this guy. He's aggressive. I had the helmet cam on him today. He was taking chances. I loved the way this guy drove today, and he's close to kind of pushing Lando. I think Lando's a great driver too, but I had him on the list as someone to look there. And it was funny. The other thing was, I mean, I don't know Fernando Alonso. He's one of my favorite drivers just from the way he talks, his calmness. And even you heard the guys talk. How is Fernando saying he's okay just sitting behind Stroll and finishing the race and getting the points, right? He's usually the lion that wants to pass. And I think it was Julian Palmer said, I think he hit all his bonuses already with the amount of points he's got. So he is just fine. And you don't want to piss off dad by embarrassing his son.
That's a
too.
good point.
So I was like, you know what? There's probably a little bit of both in there where he knows the situation he's got and he's pretty confident. He's a better driver than Lance Stroll is right now, I think, and has the ability to finish ahead of him. So there's no real pressure. I think the only pressure left for Fernando is how does he want to finish the season? I think there's a great opportunity with the amount of wind tunnel time and testing that they can get this car closer to Red Bull, and no one's touching Max. But I think the gap between if Aston Martin can get their car a little bit better, I think he can track down Checo. That's and finish second in the drivers. So I think that's the I have that written down. That's the only thing that maybe Fernando's kind of looking at for this year.
Which would be a great accomplishment. And I do agree with you. Lando's a phenomenal driver. I think we saw that in qualifying this week. We've known that for a long time, right? When they got him, they were supposed, that was kind of the final piece with Ricciardo that was going to take McLaren up into the top 3 because of the potential of Lando. And then obviously the car's gone to shit the last couple of years, but they've got the drivers. They just need to give them a weapon to get the job done in. So I guess you could, a little bit of a positive for McLaren.
I mean, it wasn't completely like a kitten out there. He did challenge his old teammate for that one lap and put him in the dusters behind, which was awesome to see. They went nuts on that. But I want to see that. That's what I want to see most is that some sort of battle for the top 3, right? If Lewis can get in there too now, that'd even make it more interesting.
Let me just bring up the driver's standings because we'll take a look at exactly how close this race is. So, yeah, Fernando, as of right now, is 18 points back of Checo and 12 points ahead of Lewis. So, I mean, if Mercedes continues to push forward a little bit, it could end up being a pretty good 3-horse race for second place, which would be some good drama down the stretch, which the Verstappens would hate because everybody would be talking about the race for second and nobody would be talking about Max winning probably a record number of races this season. Gager, off to Canada next. One day the Pit Stop Pals will be set up there.
Own
in
tent.
Montreal in a little tent, and people will come by and we'll be like, "Hey, Crofty, it's us, the Pit Stop Pals." But it's not next weekend, but it's the following weekend, and that's good for our country to have a little bit of time to lead into this race, I think.
I think so. It's I mean, everyone I've talked to that have been to the Montreal race say it's great. Back to a street circuit too, kind of in a way as well. So hopefully Checo can get his driving back. I think the last 2 weeks have been quite challenging for him. So it would be good to see him possibly get back and close the gap to Max. But yeah, it's I wish there was more competition at the top.
At the top, I know.
It's tough because if for a fan just like, oh, Max just wins every time. How exciting can this be? But it's all the other stuff. And one of the things they said, Desi, was with the Aston Martin and the upgrades they brought, they thought that they were going to be at least 0.2 quicker. So, and I don't think that worked out for them overall this weekend. So there's a lot of time within these next 2 weeks to take all the data that everyone's gathered, and hopefully they can put that forward to a more competitive battle between Mercedes and hopefully Red Bull by the end of this thing.
Did you see that video I tweeted of the drivers listening to the racetrack and guessing what that was? I mean, I guess it's what they do for a living. I mean, if somebody came into my studio and closed my eyes and said, "What's that noise?" I've done it for 14 years. I could probably tell you what it is, but that was still phenomenal. I mean, they listened to like 4 or 5 seconds of just the sound from a racetrack and got it. I thought that was nuts.
Well, they also had that blindfold where they could feel the track and they knew which one it is. Yeah, that was
good too.
But you know what? Just for the lay person, watch, if you can go back and if you have access to the helmet cams and the last 2 corners in Spain, and listen to Max go around those corners compared to everyone else. Like, he is barely lifting off the throttle, Dusty. Like, really? It's ridiculous how he's just so in tune where you hear guys and they're letting off or braking, and they were fast corners. Like, that's the one they changed, right? They got out of that chicane. Yeah. And so it was so interesting to hear Max's car and the revs compared to everyone else. And he is completely on a different level is what I picked up from that.
Before we wrap, hey, I finally watched Ford versus Ferrari.
It's good.
I watched it on the airplane on the way out to Winnipeg on Thursday. Really good movie.
Unreal
really movie. Good movie. Yeah, I thought that was really good. I still got to watch Senna. I haven't watched Rush yet either, but I want to watch Rush now that I've watched Ford versus Ferrari. I was like, I would bang all of these out. So must be some sort of push on the airlines right now to promote, because they've got like a little thing just like for auto racing, like so just like an auto racing section on the WestJet Entertainment. So yeah, I watched Ford versus Ferrari. I love Matt Damon, Christian Bale. Like, that was extremely well done. What a movie.
Rush is, I mean, those are my, I guess all 3 of those. Senna, Ford versus Ferrari, and Rush. Unbelievable racing movies. Wait till you see, like, the great thing about Rush is they have actual video of the scenes. Like, there's actual race footage.
Oh, nice.
As well.
Yeah, that's cool. There.
And I mean, it's with Thor and the bad guy from Civil War too, so it's perfect.
Oh, that'll be really good then. Yeah, I do look forward to that. I'll definitely check that out. We'll review it on a future episode of the Pit Stop Pals. We'll be back in a couple weeks, maybe even week of, depending on what's going to happen here with the Canadian Grand Prix. Look forward to that. Congratulations, Max Verstappen. You've won another one. Gager, we'll talk to you in a few weeks.
All right, buddy.
The 2 championship contenders giving it everything.
No, Mikey. No, Mikey.
It's lights out.